You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Keshia. Welcome everyone. Welcome back to the Road to Wisdom podcast. Today we have Nick Scali in, and Nick is can I say former pediatrician, or are you still working under the banner of?
Yeah, I was never actually fully finished my training as a pediatrician, but pediatric doctor.
Pediatric doctor.
Yeah, let's say former.
Yeah. All right. Well, Nick did study pediatrics, and you were in that realm of the allopathic medical system when you woke up. Can we say that?
I don't think we should say that because it makes us sound like those people.
Oh, okay. Well, like when you started to see things.
Enlightened himself.
Yeah.
No, that's still the same.
But I think the main thing we're getting at is that you, like when I met you, Nick, you were very much entrenched in the allopathic system, which comes with a whole bunch of mindsets that I myself was in at a stage. And I think when you're working within the hospital system, especially, you do start to see things or even just experience things that come up as red flags. And this may not have been what happened for you, but it's definitely what happened for me. I would experience something, and it was generally the care that was being provided to a patient, and it didn't feel right. And you don't say anything because, like for me, I was a student and I was there to learn. But you could see that maybe it was like the care they were receiving was incorrect, insufficient, wrong, potentially abusive. And those are the little its and bits that kind of woke me up to allopathic care in general. So we thought we'd get you in here today because what you're doing now is, having moved away from the allopathic system, is probably helping people still. You're probably seeing a lot of healing, and I'm just putting words in your mouth, so please stop me at any stage.
I feel like I should explain what I'm doing now, which is a bit of a mixed bag. And I feel like maybe the direction we can go is I can share a bit of what I'm doing now and then how I ended up here through the Western medical system, and talk to what you were just, speaking to about the shortcomings of that system. But most of my work now, I call it psychotherapy, and that's just a name, but it's emotional, spiritual work, basically. Mm-hmm. The main way I work is with a system called internal family systems, which is a model of psychotherapy that's super beautiful, really respectful to a person and all their parts, really welcoming, non-pathologizing. And this is a big shift away from the medical system, where it's like all these labels, especially for mental health, thrown out, ADHD, people, autism, and people become really identified with labels.
Yeah.
And in this system, there's like, there's no such thing as there's something wrong. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. When anyone comes to me, there's nothing wrong. There's just many parts of them which have been shunned or hidden away or thought to be wrong. And it's about bringing them all into our loving awareness, which is an incredible healing portal that we all carry with us. And I also work with Chinese medicine and acupuncture, but most people are coming for the internal family systems, and that's the work I'm really loving at the moment as well.
Amazing. Internal family systems is a new term for me, so if maybe you could explain a little bit further. Is there another modality of healing that can kind of,
it's a type of healing that can be called parts work. Mm-hmm. And so the foundational concept is that our psyche or our beings are made up of all these different parts. And people often experience them when there's two parts in conflict or who have different perspectives on something, like, oh, there's a part of me that really loved working in pediatrics and really wanted to stay because I felt the satisfaction of helping people and being there for kids and being there for families and supporting mums and dads and kids to be well and to live better, healthier lifestyles. And then there was another part of me that was, can I swear?
Yeah, you can swear.
That was exhausted and that was and that had a lot of issues with some parts of that system. And those parts were in conflict for a while. And so that's just an example of different parts of us that have different perspectives, different agendas within. And we've got heaps and heaps of parts. And
I think that's like such a relevant, I guess, topic to bring into our awareness, because we all have, like, everything, any bloody thing you look at in the world is nuanced, and we love to see it as black and white and good guys and bad guys. And, you know, right now I love that we can look at, and it's not just our internal health or our internal psyche, but like you can extend that to any part of life. It is complicated.
Yeah.
It's nuanced.
Yeah.
We've got so many different things that we have to consider in absolutely anything we take on in life. So I love that you can even pare that back or bring it back into your internal conflict and just like how you think about anything. If you think black and white about anything, it's a red flag.
Yeah, totally. I'm there as well. And like certainty is quite confronting. When people are really certain about something, I'm like, oh, something's fishy there. But yeah, my experience with my own journey with internal family system is when I learn the way that I learn to navigate internal conflict and how to be with different parts of myself actually affects how I am externally with other people and all the different parts and stories, and helps me navigate conflict externally. And I really wholeheartedly see, yeah, I guess so, that, yeah, we can only do as much externally as we've done internally. We can only navigate conflicts externally that we've navigated internally. We can only face shadows externally that we've faced internally. And the external follows the internal most of the time. Of course, there's environmental influences, and it's not one unidirectional. There's enmeshment and influence in both directions. And the other side of it is that the internal work is really what we've got most ability to do. Yeah, we've got less power to affect the external than we have to affect our internal. Yeah. So back to IFS. I just wanted to frame that's a massive paradigm shift in the field of psychiatry, psychology, because 20 years ago, if someone said, I had a voice that's telling me this and I have another voice that's telling me that, they'd be diagnosed schizophrenic.
Loony.
Yeah, bonkers. Yeah. And the truth is we all have those different voices and those different parts. And there's many different modalities that have popped up simultaneously, and I really see it as a global paradigm shift in how we're understanding our minds and our internal worlds. It's like, oh, and I share with people and there's instant resonance. Everyone's like, oh yeah, of course. Oh yeah. And of course we also know that there's many parts of ourselves that we don't like, or that society has told us not to like, and to put away and to pretend that they're not there. And the deepest work is to get them out of the dark and tell them that they're loved, and listen to what they've got to say and tell them that they're welcome, which is another huge paradigm shift in just like all parts of me can be welcomed and loved. It's like, oh yeah, even those parts that my parents and society and generations of stories have told me that's yucky and icky, and it's like, oh no, I can love that too. Yeah. So yeah, it's deep work, and there's very much intergenerational work in the IFS model. And yeah, I've also seen clients with physical symptoms that we do IFS work and the physical symptoms resolve.
Okay, this is really sounding like the conversation we just had, but looking at it with a different lens.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me. But it's crazy that like I've been in the same room as a pediatric doctor before, and this ain't it. Like how did you? I'm just so curious. I just want to go there straight away. How on earth did you go from the person that I would generalize to be that person, a pediatric doctor entrenched in allopathic medicine with those values, thoughts, that direction, to like the guy who's like, your icky bits matter. You should love your jealousy or your bullshit, or like talk us through it.
Or your shame. Yeah. Well, I was always a black sheep, even within medical, in my family, starting off, and then in school, in high school, medical school, even working as a doctor, people were like, your ideas, the way you see things is just a bit weird. And it's like, I never felt like, I'm with my people, everyone gets me. And there were lots of things that I hid and didn't even share. Like lots of really important parts of my life that my colleagues and even friends and peers at medical school had no idea about. So yeah, I can understand that I don't fit the mold of your experience of a pediatrician. And that was, that was an important part of my decision to move away from it, because I looked at some of the more senior, older pediatric doctors and their lifestyles and how they were with their families and how they were in the workplace. And I was like, no, I can't see myself there in 10 or 20 years. It's like, no, that's not really how I want to be living. That's not how I want to be feeling. And so that, that was a signpost, that feeling of like, I'm not like these people in a lot of ways. And there were some ways that I was, scientific and wanting to help people and
right. So you were like respectful and interested and totally trusting in like the scientific aspect of walking that path. And, the thing that I'm always really fascinated with, and, like you and I, we've all been in an argument with a medical professional about what we think is right, whether it's about bloody vaccines, some medicine or whatever.
Oh, I don't get in arguments with I just go, yes, you're right, you're right,
the person
and walk away and do whatever I want
with them till I am like beat and bruised. But like there's obviously a part of those people who are just really deeply wanting to be there to help, and they genuinely believe that they're doing God's work and healing, and they are just so important and necessary. And so I'm assuming that you honestly and genuinely believed that this way of living and healing was it.
Totally. And there's beautiful people working in those fields. Like, wow, dedicated, caring hearts, amazing people. And I still think there are parts of medicine that are super helpful and gold, and I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Sometimes we do.
As a
pediatric doctor, but I haven't.
We do keep the baby.
Sometimes we throw it out.
Yeah. And even the scientific process of like testing and experimenting and trying and following intuition, the scientific process in its purest form is incredible. It's just a curiosity. It's following human curiosity and intuition. And then I see it's being so corrupted by the pharmaceutical industry. And that's the main problem.
And it's almost, I'm guessing, impossible for these good-hearted people to look at it and be like, hang on, there's a discrepancy here, or I know better. Like, is there? Are they getting there? Do you feel, or is it just like?
I mean, people know there's all of them know that there's issues with the pharmaceutical industry running the show.
And if they didn't, with like the onslaught of docu-series and new movies out on Netflix and
So
iTunes
who pulls?
and stuff.
How does it continue to go the way it is? Like, because I've been in a situation where I've had a baby in a hospital, and like if so many people know about it, and I've actually had experience with other people like, I know this is a lot, and I know, this is annoying, and I know you're that natural mum, we've written it on the whiteboard, but I'm like, yeah, but why? Like, why have you been in here 6 times asking me to give my baby vitamin K if you know? Like, what drives the force? Like, is it a threat?
Fear, mostly.
Fear and threat.
Fear is such a big driving force in those situations. Fear that something's going to go wrong. Fear that they're going to be blamed for something going wrong, and fear of losing their jobs and losing the respect of their peers and not belonging. Like, it's so deep. And I think most of them aren't even aware of those fears helping them to make
It's just
decisions.
unconscious.
And I think too, which is a really bizarre thing that has happened within that system, is that if your kid's got the vitamin K shot and something goes wrong, they're all good.
Yeah.
Like, in your mind, well, I did everything. But if the kid doesn't have a vitamin K shot and something goes wrong, same thing could go wrong, then that's one box you didn't tick. And because you didn't tick it, well, that could then fall on you. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And that's how it's
I
like,
totally get that.
It's almost...
It's a trap.
Yeah, but it's not... I don't know if that's the intention, but it's definitely part of what holds like these mindsets so strong on like, we must tick every box. I must know her dilation during...
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is doctors get sued.
Yeah.
And that, that impacts on their career, on
Society.
their family. If a doctor gets sued, that's a huge traumatic process to go through, let alone the financial impacts. And that's what happens if they do something that's outside of the protocols or the evidence base, and they're held responsible for not towing the line.
Can I correct you there? Because evidence-based, it depends on the evidence base, right? Because a doctor could do something.
If they don't follow the
guidelines within the hospital system that's holding them.
I think the phrase is actually what the majority of doctors would do in that situation. If they do something outside of what the majority of doctors would choose, then they're negligent.
Yeah.
So that holds hostage doctors from doing anything really radical, unless they're like a super
like
niche
a surgeon
expert
or something, and they have to make a call that would be like they're the only ones that probably will ever make the call type thing.
Yeah, if they've got heaps of experience in one super niche area, and they're like they have far more experience than most doctors on the planet, then those people can, run their own show. But that's
rare.
That's rare.
And even in that case, like what comes to mind is Charlie Teo, and he got slaughtered.
Yeah.
So and he was very niched. So
it's a big story, and I've heard in the Children's Hospital in Sydney that some of the highest doctors sitting in a meeting being like, the pharmaceutical companies are holding us hostage. That was their exact words regarding, these life-saving cancer treatments for kids that the pharmaceutical companies were charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for. And the hospital's like, well, the government's not funding it. Most of the patients can't afford this. We know this can save this kid's life. What do we do? And that's what the pharmaceutical companies do. They're billion-dollar companies. They're just about profit, and they're the ones doing most of the research that's being used. And it's like, but if you can't trust that, for most doctors, it's like, okay, if everything I've been leaning on and trusting is corrupted,
what is real?
What do I
and
know?
What is the truth?
You know, I've spent 20 years pretending I know this, and now that I'm really seeing that it could be all bogus, it's like, yeah, the whole foundation becomes wobbly and shaky, and it's a massive earthquake. So,
and from a psychological standpoint, I feel like, and I'm just completely making this up, that only a small, very few people would probably have the courage to be like, this doesn't feel right. And I'm actually just going to sidestep here, and I'm actually just going to say, fuck it, to the 10 years of plus study that I did, and the tens of thousands of dollars this might have, hundreds of thousands of dollars this cost, and the fact that I'm maybe 40 and wouldn't even know where to reroute from this point. I'm just going to keep going.
Totally. And the financial stability is a piece.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, yeah, if I keep going in this, then my family's well supported. I can live in probably my own house. I can, live the lifestyle that I want to live. And if I don't know if I'll be able to make money. I don't know. There's no financial security by stepping out of what's known.
I wonder if that's why a lot of doctors in that type of setting will meet a person who has questions or concerns with the protocol that they're putting in place with like frustration or anger. Because I know there's many times where I've gone head on with like the top doctor and like Nico, I've done it twice now, and they're just fucking angry at me. They're furious. They're like they know they're not getting to me, but I wonder if it's because they know that maybe, I don't know, like maybe there is another wave and they can't take it, or maybe that they have to admit that the stupid mommy's right maybe, or like, okay, we'll just settle it there, or...
Yeah, it's hard to
I don't know.
I think it's probably a little bit different for every individual.
Yeah.
And their experiences. They've all had lots of experiences.
They've seen a lot of shit as well.
They've seen hectic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that,
so much nuance, I suppose, to that as well.
It's heavy as well, seeing babies die, and especially the head of NICU when you're responsible.
Yeah, like, you're making the calls.
Whoosh,
that's a lot.
That's heavy. That's heavy on the heart, and it's hard to. I reckon most of them have a lot of trouble actually feeling.
Well, you'd have to numb out at some stage, and that's what I feel like with
it's protection
with the surgeons as well. Like you have to be a sociopath to an extent to be able to do that day in and day out, like cut people open and play with their organs
and the expectation is you do a good job and the person survives, and if you don't, well, you failed.
But you've got to know going into it every single time, I could fail at this. Yeah. So there'd have to be some level where you do actually have to be detached and a little deranged to be able to be in those scenarios. But because the reality is you're in a hospital, people are going to die. There's no, unless you're working with broken arms day in and day out and you're just realigning bones,
but even them, they have 80-year-old grandmas that come in and with a broken hip, and they try and fix the hip, and then the grandma dies in hospital because the anesthetic and being off all the things.
So so I guess in any scenario, you've got to accept that you're working in an environment where people are dying, and I don't think that anyone it almost wouldn't be human to be able to be in that situation day in and day out and feel the grief of every patient's family and feel the grief of the loss of every human that would move on in that scenario. And they wouldn't be able to function, especially at the hours that most doctors are working and how they've got to show up day in, day out. It's there's no time to process. And then I think too, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll probably get this wrong, but I think it's that allopathic medical care is the top 3 killer. I think that's maybe in the United States, but it's heart disease, cancer, and then allopathic care.
Night shift. Is it just...
No, not being in it. You will die from medical care.
Mistakes from medical care.
But not even mistakes. People, proper prescriptions, actual, doing the right thing as a doctor. You if you're in that system of care, that's the top 3 killer in the United States. So
interesting.
Yeah,
And, you know, the other side of it is that in Australia we have like a very amazing medical care system compared to many places in the world. And I still see that and I'm like, wow. And globally, yeah, we've got one of the best medical systems and access to these incredible technologies that can be super helpful at some times. And still, there's major issues and over diagnosis, over treatment, over everything because of the issues we've been talking about. So it's not black and white. I'm like, I don't say that whole system's wrong and bad. And, you know, part of my move away was that I've had a lot of different experiences and studied different things throughout my life, and I just felt there's actually more for me to offer than just following that standard route. And, you know, that space, there's heaps of people that can study pediatrics. Like there are hundreds of people every year that are studying pediatrics, and they'll all go on and be the pediatricians. But, you know, my unique experiences and my unique permutation of grabbing from so many different traditions and wisdom, wells of wisdom and practices gives me a really unique opportunity to offer something that not many other people can offer.
So just to paint the picture more clearly for people who don't know you, and I don't know you either, but like, who were you as a person? Were you like a person who would like get sick and be like, all right, allopathic, like let's go? Or like, were you, these are medicines that I truly believe in that you need right now to patients, and like that was your mindset? Or were you kind of like, oh, I wish I could offer this person acupuncture, or like I wish I could, you know, like, have you tried this or have you tried that? Or was it kind of, were you, where were you?
Have you looked at the emotional root cause of your cancer?
What happened to you 29 years ago?
So I grew up in a household where me and my brother and sister were fully vaccinated, and we'd go to the GP when we got sick. And I didn't get sick much. I've probably been to the GP a handful of times in my life. And then at age 15, my mum started doing yoga, and she's like, you should start doing yoga. And I was like a rugby player and I had a sore lower back, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll try yoga. And I started doing yoga from age 15. And I also went on a school trip to my school, like private boys' school in Sydney, offered a school trip to Nepal. And I went to Nepal, and something about the culture in Nepal and visiting Buddhist temples and monasteries, I was just like, whoosh, landed really strong. And I kept doing yoga, and then at age 19 went to India for 3 months, and at age 21 did my first 10-day Vipassana.
Oh my God,
meditation.
I did that too in India.
Oh, this was in Blue Mountains in Australia.
Well, Varanasi, a bit different than Blue Mountains.
Yeah. The food was probably better in Varanasi.
Well, I had like literally slept on this table with nothing else. So it was the full experience.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. So that was at like age 20, 21. And I just kept getting called to different, I started working with plant medicines at age 22 and really did that intensely for 7 years. And this is all while studying medicine. And I remember some mentors and teachers being like, are you actually going to finish your medicine studies? Are you serious? Are you actually? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to finish them. And I did. And I just kept going. And yeah, I really had a dream of contributing to a shift in the medical system and bringing like a really holistic, well-resourced from different traditions offering to mainstream medical practice. And yeah, I was, even when I moved up to the Northern Rivers, could imagine setting up a pediatric clinic in Mullumbimby where I could offer Chinese medicine and acupuncture and emotional psychotherapy for kids, and also offer blood tests and government-funded treatments and herbal remedies, you know, which doesn't really exist. You know, there's no pediatric practice that is really holistic, integrative. And so I was kind of working with that vision as well, and that was keeping me in the door. And then the COVID vaccine happened.
Dun, dun.
Yeah, and I was pretty much one of the first doctors affected because they closed the border between Queensland and New South Wales unless you're vaccinated. And I was working at Gold Coast Hospital, living in New South Wales, so I literally couldn't go to work unless I got vaccinated. And no, everyone else working in the hospital wasn't mandated yet, and I was like, it's just me. They're literally, and they're like, oh, you can't come to work.
Why didn't you just get the COVID vaccine? I know why you didn't, but I'm just asking because it makes for juicy content.
Yeah. And
This will be the real.
I'll wind back because at the beginning of COVID, my partner was like, they're going to mandate it for everyone. And I'm like, no way. There's no way they can do that. This is experimental mRNA. It's a whole new way of delivering vaccines. There's no way they could force people to get it. And then I was one of the first that they did. And I was just like, whoosh, my whole world was shattered. I couldn't believe that they'd actually
Okay, so
put that on me.
Were you a skeptic prior to this?
Oh, can I tell a story? Because when I first met Nick, he was like, so why don't you vaccinate your children? And I think I gave you a really vanilla answer, but it was
Don't
like,
wanna?
No, I think it was more like along the lines of, well, I'm vaccine damaged and it's affected me in an autoimmune way.
Yeah, you did share that.
And I feel like that was the cause of that. And until I know more information, I don't want to put that on my children. Yeah. And you were like, okay, that makes sense. But we have a mutual friend who I think you argued with a lot.
I lived with for a month, and we just loved debating with each other. I mean, there was a part of me that loved it, but it was really kind of got pretty heated. We're living in the same house.
You were living in her house.
She was kindly putting me up for a month while I moved to the Northern Rivers, and we just go tooth and nail.
Okay, so you were not skeptic then?
I mean, I was open to learning and
Mm.
discovering, but I was still
On the other side.
So not only had I studied medicine, I'd done a Masters of Public Health, which
there you go.
Nail it in.
I was like deeply indoctrinated in one perspective, you know.
I remember studying public health and in my health science degree to be a naturopath, and I was like, oh yeah, everyone's got to do the same thing in order for the thing to be working. And it's like the community's responsibility.
Yeah.
Or
and
die.
That's it.
No.
It's like,
Yeah.
It's an obligation for the global community.
Mhm.
And it's especially.
You have to do your parts.
Yeah. And, you know.
And your part is vaccinating your children, by the way, because what is it? It's still like 70% of adults would not be up to date with the current vaccine scheme. And so you as a parent, most parents that vaccinate their kids would not be up to date and not actually be, what is it? Find the word for me, someone.
Up to date?
Up to date, yeah, but like immune, like have that immune response.
The immunity.
Yeah, have the immunity from vaccination, but doing your part was making sure that you did it to your children.
Yeah.
Which is
and I landed in the perspective when I met my partner, she wasn't vaccinated as a child, and
Lucky girl.
I think she had a few early ones, but then her mother decided not to when they were like 3 or 4 or 5 or something. And when I met her, she's like, there's no way I'm ever vaccinating my child.
Who is your girlfriend?
she's amazing.
Let's be friends.
And so that was like, and you know, at that point I'd landed in the perspective, and this was just before COVID, I'd landed in a perspective of, yes, it's probably, if there's a child who's not living in a crowded city, who's connected to nature, who has a healthy diet, who has loving parents who give them a lot of attention and emotional support, then yes, they probably don't need to be vaccinated. But still, from a global perspective, most kids aren't growing up in that situation. and that vaccines, and that, I guess the public health model was still alive for me at that time, and that there was a responsibility
for everyone else to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that you could choose between like looking after your kid or looking after the global community. Yeah. And I really saw that as a clear decision. I was like, okay, yeah, I can choose to look after my kid. And given that all those things are happening, which is, where I think the other part is that we live in we're blessed and privileged to be living the way we do. All three of us, I'm talking, and to be able to support our children and have this environment, it's really amazing, and it's a very small minority in the world that offer them this opportunity, offer their kids this opportunity, and I'm under no illusions about that, and so it's really unique, and Western medicine doesn't consider those different factors really. It's a broad stroke for all kids because it's too time consuming, it's too hard to really find out from every individual that comes whether they actually would benefit or be harmed more by the vaccine.
Yeah.
So it's all done on population data, like huge numbers where there's so much variation. The data that we're going by is data related to kids in China and Africa and America and like kids living in poverty. It's like, of course, it's a completely different situation. And yeah, that's another one of the major issues. It's not really individualized, tailored, considered.
Preventative medicine.
Yeah. And yeah, I think there's many systems, that are trying to be globalized and made uniform for the whole global population, and that doesn't work. It's got us in the mess we're in now. And
if we've seen it anywhere, the COVID vaccine's a really good example of that.
We railroaded the conversation about why.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm bringing it back.
Bring it back
I love
to
railroads.
Yeah. You couldn't get to work, and you were like definitely decided at that point that you weren't going to get the COVID vaccine, or pondering.
No, I
still.
was just like, what do I do now?
Okay.
And I felt betrayed and shocked, and I was devastated. I was devastated because I thought I was a really good doctor. And I felt like not only could I was really like showing up and being with patients, and I'd get feedback from especially in the Northern Rivers where I was working. I was working at Tweed Heads Hospital and saw a lot of people who lived in our community and people that I'd see in the streets, and they were like, oh my gosh, it's so good to have you here, to see your face, to have your understanding of where I'm coming from, and just be met like that when I go to the hospital. And that had me want to keep showing up in that way and want to be a pediatric doctor coming from that place and being able to understand their perspectives and living in a similar community, because there's not many doctors that are for those people. And then I was just like, really got hit with the devastation of, I've really got to choose here. And yeah, my body didn't want it. And I honoured my body over my career potentially, and what my peers thought of me, and all the hours and money that I dedicated, and all the financial security stories that were there. And yeah, it was hard. I was in deep grief once I made the decision. Once I just said no to them, I was like crying for days, just not knowing what was next. And it was super beautiful as well, because like I think the week of or the week after, I told the hospital, I'm not getting it. I'm not coming back. A man who I didn't really know but had heard about me and knew I offered meditation courses, which is another thing I offer. He's like, can I meet with you? I want some mentoring or some support. I want to learn meditation. I want something from you. I was like, yeah, come up. So he came over to our place and we sat
Is this
down.
a doctor?
No, just a man in the community that knew we had mutual friends. And he came up and we talked about what he was looking for. And out of that conversation, I was like, oh, I designed a 12-week program that involved so many different aspects of my life. It was meditation, it was ritual, it was nature connection, there was medicine work involved, herbal medicines, movement, qigong. And I just designed this program, which I'd never even thought of doing. The guy who came to ask for it didn't even end up in the course, but it ended up a full...
It kind of sounds like you were completely catapulted to exactly where you were meant to be.
And I was just like, I live like on a cliff, and I just had this feeling that I jumped off the cliff, and I just like all of a sudden found these wings, and I was fully being supported, and I felt supported by just people and energies and life, and it was just like, I was like, wow, I'm free. I can.
Well, this is the true change that you were visualizing that you could create, I suppose. And it's something to be said for someone who's willing to take that leap off the cliff and be like, fuck, this just really doesn't feel right. It's not the right thing. It's really wrong, and I'm not going to do it, because like that's what a leader does.
Yeah.
And like there was a lack of leadership, especially with men being like, yeah, no, that's not right. And I'm not going to do that.
I'd love to just like take it back to saying no to a COVID vaccine was so symbolic. So not just of saving your own skin, and I feel like most of our listeners would be in that boat of like, no, I'm not putting that poison in my body, but it was such an important like step for people in those systems to take when they did. And I'm talking about teachers at schools, doctors, therapists, like whatever it was, because when we see people push back on something that is so clearly wrong, and in the allopathic system, not having a minimum of 7 years of research behind it before it is taken to market, not having like there were so many red flags with that one preventative. Is it medication? Do we call it a medication? Can we class it as a medication?
It's an experiment.
It's an experimental drug.
It's an experimental drug. And, you know, when a new drug comes to the market, generally it needs to have so many studies behind it, so many years of research. They need to repeat those studies. Like all of that data points need to be met over and over and over again. And they were pushing something, forcing it, when none of that was met. So, I mean, just, you know, having like, we really needed like a massive outcry of, no, this is actually...
Yeah, and even like the amount of nurses that left had an impact, you know.
Yeah.
That the New South Wales health system was like, we're short-staffed.
Yeah.
They never said how many. I don't think they really would have publicly said that
No one came to work.
Nurses left because of the vaccine, but enough did to have an impact. I mean...
And it's really sad, because what it did was also like within those systems, it removed the somewhat conscious, like critical thinkers, which I guess is what actually they're the people we need in there, because critical thinking is so limited within those systems. And yeah, so I mean, look, we could talk about that for forever.
The flip side of the gift of the whole thing is that had people being like, oh, maybe I should take more responsibility for where I'm looking for this trusted health advice. Maybe I will do some different therapy, or like there's a big awakening to how we respond to symptoms, illness, and, you know, managing ourselves.
I think, you know, for me, the size of the emotional response had me really question a lot. And it's like when it became so personal, and it just brought the corruption to my front door, basically. It's like, oh, it's here. It's affecting you right now, you know? And that was a different level of being emotionally affected by it, had me just see a lot more and choose differently. And I think, the other thing that I'm still discovering, that there's like really well-respected professors, doctors that I'm still finding out never got the vaccine, but somehow still kept working in the system. Then they don't really tell anyone. Some have told me because they know of my story, but I wonder how many, it's like.
But then, that's not as helpful. Like, I mean, it's there's good and bad to that. Yeah. But good that they're in the system, because you want those people who are critical thinkers. Like, I feel like that was almost a sign of who a really trustworthy doctor was, is that someone who was like not jumping on board the next thing straight away. There was like a thought process there. So it's great that those people were still in the system, but at the same time, on a larger scale, it reduced the impact that it could have had on a. And I
have compassion. Like, I imagine if I was like 40 years into my career and like a world leader in my field, it'd be pretty hard to step away from.
Yeah,
it'd be a lot harder than it was for me at my stage, where I was already contemplating taking a year off from the Western medical system to offer more meditation, acupuncture, and have time to pursue those things.
So once you made the decision of like, okay, I'm done here, and went through that whole mourning process of like shit and also amazing because look what's in front of me, was that like an instant, semi-instant, like relatively piled together time, or was it like months after, or were you kind of just like in this period of time where you were like, fuck?
No, it was like a month later. I was in it, like just offering my course with 10 people and like was seriously financially supported. And I was just like, wow, that was quick.
Amazing.
and then it was like, it's been for the last 2 years, the question, am I going back?
Can you go back?
Yeah.
Because mandates aren't.
Sorry, what?
And I also. No, don't. Yeah. You got that communication, right? Yeah.
Bypass.
The energy just.
We can bypass that. We're not here to implicate people. So I think something that we wanted to continue on with and also get from you, because you're actually the first male guest we have had in studio.
In the flesh.
Wow. What an honor.
I know. So you recently became a father, kind of recently.
Yeah. 16 months ago or so. Yeah.
And I guess with fatherhood and motherhood comes a lot more initiations, realizations, like it's another bloody flip on your world. So I think we wanted to kind of talk through that a little bit and how how that has further influenced the way you work.
Yeah. Massively.
Let's start with probably preconceived notions of fatherhood, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, and that's the main. I expect it's similar to the identity dissolution and recreation that happens for mothers, and it's available to fathers. I think many fathers don't meet it. I think it's not really talked about, and there's not a lot of support for fathers to realize that this is a huge initiation and it's a possibility to step into a whole new identity, way of being, way of knowing the world, way of seeing the world. And I felt unsupported through a lot of it. I was like, there's so many courses for pregnant mamas, for new mums. There's mothers groups, there's mothers there's an abundance of choices, right?
Especially in this area.
Yeah. And even online courses that are available to everyone. There's lots of information to support, as there should be, but there's not much available for dads. And that's something I've really been seeing and feeling the call to offer as well. It's like, okay, what do dads need from the moment they find out they're pregnant? The practical knowledge, the practical support, but also the understanding of what they're transitioning into, what fatherhood means, working through all their relationships to their dynamics with their own father, and how that shapes what they think a father is, and how it shapes what kind of father they think they're going to be, and how to consciously choose to be a certain father or not.
But we talk about relationships quite a bit too, and that would also flow into how it affects your relationship.
Totally, that's the biggest part. I mean, that's been the biggest part for me. Talia, it's like, wow, what I thought a parent, like a partner to a woman who's a mum, what that is. The way I saw it modelled in my family and the way I see it modelled by the majority of society is actually not what Talia wants. And it's like, okay, so how do I be everything that she wants me to be, plus everything that I know I need to be, plus everything that Tiger wants me to be as a father? It's a lot. It's a lot.
Why don't you know this? I mean, like, come on.
I know. And we've discussed, obviously we've been having lots of conversations about being in the birth portal again, and the way that we choose to birth, which is at home and maybe with less assistance or whatever that is, and how, for women in that position, we put a lot of pressure on our men to be wearing so many hats within a birth space, which is like such an incredible spiritual, like just insane initiation every single time. And so it's good to hear from Dad.
Which is okay in the birth space, it's like, okay, I can really, there's a defined period, there's a ceremony that I can really show up for in a big way.
Yeah.
But it's when it's like, okay, postpartum, it's like every day is the ceremony and I've got to show up in this big way for the rest of my life. It's like, wow, that's confronting for a lot of men. And the reality is some things have to be let go of.
Yeah.
And
that's when we need to lean on our community a whole lot more, because if you're expecting your husband or partner to provide for the family as well as take on majority of the responsibility for the other children. I mean, that's not your case yet, but in our situation and many women's situation, you're asking them to be on top of stuff that they probably wouldn't be day to day, because their sole responsibility is protection and providing. So now they have to kind of put on a mother hat as well and take care of the kids so that you can rest and recover. And they
record your podcast episodes.
Yeah. We love you, Togga and Brenton.
Awesome dadders.
They're so good. And like the pressure mounts, and these are all things that we just expect our partners to do and be silent about it, because we just went through between anywhere from an hour to 26 hours to a week of labor, and we need to recover and we need to rest, and we've got the newborn, which is all valid. But at the same time, I guess that's where you need to.
Yeah. And when we're not in the village, we're under-resourced,
Absolutely.
And
you only have so many hands.
Well, from a father's perspective, like, what's going on? Like, what do you need? Like, what's
So the way I'm seeing it, you look at the traditional, probably, I don't know about your families, but, my dad was at work. He was an incredible provider. But then I know my mum wanted more emotional presence and support, and still does. And I would have liked more time. I got weekends with him, which was amazing. And I loved my time with my dad. But, it's like, oh, why did he only come home at 8:00 each night as I was getting in bed? Like, couldn't we have had a few hours of playing together and rumbling, And so if you look at that traditional role, Dad would go to work, he'd provide for the family, amazing. There'd be financial stability, but nothing, safety, providing house, providing clothes, all the things. And now, so nothing has left the man's plate, but a whole lot of stuff's been added on. And we're still working out how to do it all, you know, because there's not been a whole lot of modeling. We're in a new time where men actually know what it is to emotionally support their children and their partners and show up and be present and listen and
engage,
feel, feel. Like so many men for generations haven't deeply felt, and so we don't have a roadmap. We're kind of making it up as we go, and just I feel like just some understanding of how big that is for men in this time to be willing to step up and take on all that and to rewrite the map. And we need each other, men need to find other fathers who are willing to take on all those extra things that haven't been done in previous generations, who are willing to lean on each other, good uncles. What does it mean to be a good uncle? Like, how can I support my friend when he's on dad duties, and how can we support each other? And I think just patience and compassion from women that this is a new challenge, and it's going to take time for us to work out what we're doing and where we're going. Yeah,
have some grace is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, and like I think all women can relate. Like if you need to pull it back into your own shoes, like how many households are women needing to go back to work really quickly, so that they've got to wear that full-time mother hat, but then also help provide for the household, because one wage doesn't really cut it anymore for living expenses. So I guess we bringing it back to, well, everyone's wearing lots of hats.
It's definitely our environments and society and culture and the ego that needs a bit of probably deflating of like, maybe I don't need that. Maybe I don't need that either. Maybe we can minimize and simplify.
Simplification, Our ancestors were
pretty basic.
Pretty happy with a
and
lot
pretty
less.
happy,
And connected, which is the main one. It's like, is this stuff actually contributing to our connection with each other and the earth and what we and to source and to our life force?
I often think that it's like we're sometimes just flogging a dead horse, like, just a simple trip to the supermarket and you could like eco this, natural this, eco that, and you're like, well, cool, we could replace everything in this entire store with like eco or like biodegradable, but it doesn't stop at the fact that it's going to make more or less no impact, because we're still buying the thing, we're still working our asses off to get to the thing that's actually just now more expensive because it's eco and biodegradable. But like, it's actually removing the obstacles, like one thing at a time, or removing the things that we think we constantly need to be having in the first place to create this more, I think, this bit more harmony and like just the mental load, and expecting the father to take on all of the roles and the mother role and the carer role, because mama wants to go to work and to afford for all the unnecessary things that we think we need and want.
Yeah. I think mutual acknowledgement of mothers and fathers that it's tough times.
Well, I bring it up because our conversations mainly revolve around mothers. And so, and the overwhelm that comes from mothering, and how much pressure we feel on ourselves. And I think as mothers, we can get so caught up in what I have to do and what this is for me. And like, I mean, this is probably where majority of the fights or disagreements between me and Togga. It's like, you can't see all the things I'm doing. You can't see how hard I'm working, blah, blah, blah. And he's thinking the exact same shit. And like, and if we can, switch it around and be like, okay, if I feel like I'm taking on all these roles that traditionally, my grandma has never worked a day in her life. She had 6 kids. She stayed home. She cooked. She cleaned. She looked after the kids and then the grandkids. And, my grandpa's always been the sole provider for her. So their roles are very, defined. And they're defined, and they were able to function and live an incredible life very happily within that system. But we're in a different world, like as you said, where it's this new world. I mean, like,
it's just biological norms, and then biologically adapting to like perhaps like men are much more simple Like they are. You just are.
simple.
Like my little boy is totally different to my 3 girls
yeah.
because he just wants to be fed and go to sleep.
Yeah, wait till he gets a little bigger, mate.
No. And
No, I will not wait.
I will not wait. This is who he is. It's
He is
very
my
clear.
chill
It's
head.
very clear. This is who he is. Okay. And I sometimes feel like how many years, like decades, is it going to take for men to adapt and women to adapt? Or are we just kind of like just going like this? Like, why don't we just, you know what I mean? Like understand that there is a biological difference. Like perhaps it's not good for you to be around the kids all day. Like I know it's not good for my partner to be around my kids like every day. I mean, like during the first trimester of this pregnancy, I was like, you got to cook, clean. There's a lot of laundry. And I got to like get dressed and go to school and you got to clean up and like, I'm just going to be over here. And I just felt like he was happily, like he did it and he's very good at it of handling the shit around the house. But it didn't make him happy. It didn't make him thrive. He didn't achieve any goals. Wasn't like beaming. And I just don't think that men should do that because it doesn't make them like that.
I think we need to,
testosterone doesn't increase there.
yeah, and we've had this conversation with
Many times.
Dr. John, no, not
John
Dr.
Gray.
John Gray, but he speaks to those traditional roles and how that supports hormonal function and balance.
It works.
But again, I just don't think like you said, and I said already, we're just in a different world now where we do actually need to step up and as women, like there's almost a feeling, and I'm happy to admit for me as well, like just being at home with kids, I want to express myself creatively out of that mother role, which is this at the moment. And Togga doesn't just want to be providing and protecting. Yes, he has those roles, but he also wants to be around the kids. He also wants to be part of, like go to their plays and see that, So there's a more of a mixing. It's good to have an understanding of like biologically where we're thriving and what's going to support our nervous systems, but then at the same time knowing the nuance of where we're at and how to meet those needs and new requirements. It's big. It's a puzzle,
it's nuanced, and I think, they're both true. They're both true. Like I've noticed an estrogen surge since having a boy, and it's not great.
I have breasts since I've had a child. Don't know why.
Man boobs are well and truly on their way.
Listen to our chat with John.
Yeah, I will.
He'll hit you up.
But and also, for me, the biggest one is men. If they're feeling like the emotional aspect that men have been cut off from for a long time is a huge one. Like whoosh, there's a whole new life and new way of connecting to themselves and to their partner and to their kids if they start feeling,
All right, everyone, we just lost Chloe. She had to duck off, but I think we can probably. Did you have any final words before we?
No, thanks for having me.
Well, Nick, if people want to find you, where can they? Oh, and do you want to share like what you're offering at the moment?
Yeah, what am I offering at the moment? Did you have a lot of local listeners?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just about to launch a 6-week program for teenage boys, which I'm super excited about.
Oh.
Yeah. There's going to be kind of mindfulness and ritual and nature connection woven in. That's not what we're telling the boys. It's like, oh, you're coming to do bush skills and adventuring and wrestling and all the fun stuff that teenage boys want to do. But yeah, it's a lot about and emotional work. Yeah. So yeah, I'm offering that with a dear brother who also works with young men. And so that'll be near Mullum.
If you want to say the date, because this will come out a little bit after our recording.
Oh yeah, so that'll be.
It could be out already.
It'll probably be starting around the 14th of November.
Yeah. Okay. So that will be out by the time this is released. Check it out.
Yeah.
Is it like? Can you sign up at any stage?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be called Wild Hearts. Wild Hearts. Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see about the name, but that's what's here at the moment. I have a really average website, but you can contact me through there. It's samadhitree.com.au.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And we can link to that in the show notes too.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'll give you my phone number that you can put in the show notes if people want to reach out.
Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah. 100%, yeah.
Okay. Well,
I love people contacting me on the phone.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's so much easier than emails get lost.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see how that goes. We might put that in the show notes. I'm going to have a chat with Nick offline. No, thank you so much for coming in, Nick, because this has been a really eye-opening conversation. And I think it is really good to see people's journeys and learnings from one system to the next system, and how we can incorporate and integrate that into how we take on life and how we're helping people heal and how we can heal ourselves, because we're all about taking responsibility for that and empowering our parents.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing your insights.
To all the parents out there, you're doing great.
I know it's time.
Yeah. Thanks, Keshia.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.